Hello and welcome to this first episode of Game Level TV's Let's Learn to Play. Let's learn to play Crusader Kings 2. This first episode is going to be about characters, and basically it's going to be just looking at people. So if you already know about how characters interact with each other and the role of the council on your stats and that sort of thing, you can probably skip to episode 2. Episode 2 will be up next week if you're watching it in the present. If you're watching it in the future after I've uploaded it, then obviously it'll be there already, so you won't have to timey-wimey stuff. Anyway, this is the first screen that you guys see when you begin the game. So when you click single player, this is the screen that'll pop up, and what this is a map of the world. Yes, thanks GreyHunter, you just stated the perfectly obvious. Yes I did, but I did it for a reason. What this is for is so you can choose who you're going to play as. So right now it's in terrain mode, but if we go to independent realms, everything's suddenly coloured. Now you can filter this by different ranks, so you can play as a count, and that'll filter out counts, and that'll show you only counts. So you'll only see people who are account level in title. Now obviously some of these won't apply to you guys, because some of you won't have the Sword of Islam DLC, or you won't have the Republic. The Republic is a Duke title though, but we'll get to that in a moment. Some of these won't be available to you. Like, they'll show up, but you won't be able to select them and play as them, because if you haven't got the Sword of Islam DLC, you can't play as Muslims. If you haven't got the Republic, you can't play as Republics. So that's counts. You can ramp it up to Dukes if you want to, and that'll show you all the duchies. So all the people with Duke titles. So for example, we've got Fulks. Oh, no we don't. It's Guilhem. Guilhem. I'm assuming it's Guilhem. Guilhem the 8th of Aquitaine. There you go. Or you could have, where is it? No, Duke William. Duke William the Bastard. Or you could play as Duke Morcar of Northumberland, but we'll be playing as Duke Murchad of Munster. We'll get to that in a minute. You can also filter by kingdoms if you'd like, so that's fairly self-explanatory. There isn't a filter for empires, mostly because there's only like 2 when you begin. Holy Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire. That's it. More emerge later on, but it's an empire. It's fairly self-explanatory. If it doesn't show up in any of the other ones, it's an empire. You've also got religions, so I'm not quite sure why you would use this when you're selecting a character. I guess so you'd know where you couldn't pick, so you can't pick pagans, and you can't pick Muslims if you don't have the relevant DLC. Pagans will become available though, apparently. All pagans will become available after you purchase the old gods. So when that comes out, I know what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be going a Viking. So you can also do it by culture if you want to play a particular culture. So say you want to play Normans, you could zoom in and see that Normans rule Normandy. Bretons rule Brittany, Irish people rule Ireland. But obviously there are some people who are not of the same culture, like Dublin here. You'd think, hang on, that's going to be Irish. No, not in this time period, it's Norwegian. But that also becomes more relevant as you use these buttons. And what these are time skippers. So this one does centuries, this one does decades, and this one does years. So if we click that, it'll go boom, 1067, and you hear a little clock ticking. You could also go forward by a century, so boom, 1167. There you go. You can go forward by decade, obviously. Now it's 1177, and we'll do it again, 1187. Dun dun dun. Looky there. The Kingdom of Jerusalem. Anyway, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at the bookmark dates. The bookmark dates, well, we're going to be playing Stamford Bridge as the scenario. I won't be playing the whole game through as the Duke, obviously, because I'm already doing a Let's Play, and that's time intensive enough as is. But if you do want to see basically my way of playing the game, I will include a link in the description to my channel and to the playlist if you guys want to have a look. Anyway, they've got set scenarios, such as Stamford Bridge, where you can basically pick a time. So we've got Stamford Bridge, which is just before... It's actually on the day of the battle, I believe. The day of the Battle of Stamford Bridge, where Harold Godwinson, King of England, fights off the forces of Harold Hardrada and his traitorous brother Tostig. Oh, it's right there. I thought, oh yes, I'll show how clever I am. Okay, well, I'll do some of the other ones without having to click them. So we've got William the Conqueror as well. William the Conqueror is after Duke William the Bastard has conquered England. Actually, I'll explain this first. Yeah, I know, I'm being a bit haphazard. Duke William is the guy that everyone commonly knows as Duke William, or King William the Conqueror, and he thought that he had a legitimate claim on the throne of England because apparently Edward the Confessor had promised it to him, and King Harold Godwinson had reinforced that promise, and then broke his sacred oath. So the Pope said, right, off you go, you can whack him. Everybody knows that. Harold Godwinson is the guy who inherited from Edward the Confessor and broke his promise, or at least the promise that William said he made, on some sacred saint's bones that he would support William in becoming King of England. Harold obviously denies this, but Harold doesn't live to be able to, sort of deny it in public because he dies at the Battle of Hastings. And Harold Hardrada is a Norwegian king who fights and rules in the way of the old Vikings. He's a true Scandinavian Viking. And he has a claim because his relative Canute was the last last Scandinavian king of England. Well, the Danish bit of England. It's generally recognized as the Danish bit of England, but the Norwegians were there as well. So there's that. You can play as William the Conqueror, well, the William the Conqueror scenario, which is after William has won, and you'll notice that they're very, very close together. It's because William was ridiculously quick in his conquest and claiming of the kingdom. Obviously, the harrying of the north and all those other things, such as the creation of the Marcher Lords along the Welsh border, proves that he didn't actually conquer the kingdom. He just he was king in name, but not so much in function. But he was very, very, very aggressive with his bringing of Norman culture over to England, and it's interesting how quickly that changes things. Anyway, the Alexiad is the Byzantine Empire and the Sultanate of Rum, or the Seljuks, as you probably remember them mostly. And that's just before the Battle of Manzikert. Manzikert is essentially the victory that secured Turkish supremacy over what was left of the Byzantine Empire. And it was basically only a matter of time until the Byzantines fell, which they did in 1453 with the fall of Constantinople and the death of Constantine, the last emperor. Yes, history with me, GreyHunter. We haven't even got to the character bit yet. We will. Anyway, you can play as pretty much anybody, but they bookmark characters of interest, obviously. And the Third Crusade, well, Latin Empire, fairly boring. The Mongols is kind of interesting, but you can't actually play as the Mongols yet, so And the 100 Years' War, that's the one we all know about. The whole 100 Years' War that didn't actually go for 100 years, it went for longer. But anyway, we digress. Who we're going to be playing as is Duke Murchad of Munster, so let's get going. Initializing game, adapting history. I love that little bit up there, by the way. It's so awesome. So here we go. This is Duke Murchad of Munster. He's the Duke of Munster. And I recommend that for your first few games you play in Ireland, maybe not as Murchad, maybe you play as a single county count and sort of build up from there. But for the first little while that you're learning, Ireland is great because there is no king, but you can form the kingdom. Because the only requirement of the kingdom is that you have enough of the island of Ireland to actually form it. So you require 7 out of 13 counties. Fairly easy, and it gives you a sort of taste of pretty much everything. It's a really, really good experience to play in this area, because you'll learn, and learning is, part of the experience. So we've got here Duke Murchad of Munster. We're age 39, we're not married, and yet somehow we have a son. Nice. I'm curious exactly how we managed that, considering that the Immaculate Conception is supposed to be, Mary, who was a woman. And apparently we didn't have a mother either. I'm not sure why that is. I'm assuming it's probably like a gap in history that they just don't know, so they left it out. Anyway, we'll go over these things first. So we're playing as a dynasty in this game, which is somewhat different to most games of this type, where you play as a country. It's the game that you'd probably most be familiar with is the Total War series, where you play as a country and you basically go, right, I'll be having that, and you ruffle stomp whoever it is that has whatever it is you want. In this, you play as a person, as an individual, so it's a little bit different. And you play as the dynasty, so we play as Duke Murchad of Munster, but once Duke Murchad dies, as long as his son is alive, we'll be playing as his son. And then if his son has a kid, we'll be playing as the kid, etc, etc. So right now, Duke Murchad of Munster of the Uabrian clan is hanging out in Bunratty in the county of Thormond. That is here. He's reigning in Bunratty. He's unmarried, so that'll give us an interesting little aside. We'll go through marriage and the rules of marriage. But what's interesting is this: he's Irish, so this is your culture. Your culture is very, very important, because if your culture is not the same as a lot of your vassals will not like you. Same thing with your religion. If you are Catholic, most people will like you, because most of Europe at the moment is Catholic. So if we go to the religious view, Catholic. So if you're playing in Western Europe and Northern Europe, you'll generally, well, we'll say Central and Western Europe. If you're playing in those places, it's generally safe if you're a Catholic. If you're a Catholic heresy, that can get a bit problematic. So this is your religion. Again, very kind of important. If you're not the same religion as your vassals, or your vassals aren't the same religion as your overall liege, if you're in service to a king, say, as a duke, that also generates negatives. And if you are of a different religion or a heresy, you can get holy warred, and you can holy war against people who are also not of your religion. But that's not what this video is about. We will get to that stuff later. Under that, you have your traits. Well, your stats. These are your traits. You have your stats. So the first one is diplomacy, which is essentially, how diplomatic you are, how good you are at talking with people. Martial, fairly self-explanatory, how good you are at fighting, how good you are at shellacking other people. Stewardship, how good you are at accounting. Intrigue, how good you are at stabbing people in the back with knives and not getting noticed. And learning, which is how quick you get technology researched, and essentially how intelligent you are. So some of these things will be lower because of our traits, and you can see the breakdown there. We've got a base of 6 diplomacy, but we lose 4 of it because of our various traits. So we'll get to traits in a minute. What we've got here are our resources, I suppose you could call them. There's money, and our monthly balance is plus 0.77 gold. That's actually not too bad for a beginning duke, and that'll go up fairly quickly, and especially with some of the council functions, but we'll get to that in a second. Prestige is fairly obvious. That's how famous you are, essentially. And it also can, if you've got enough of it, influence your vassals to like you more. So you'll notice after you've got about 1,000 prestige, that even if your vassals don't like you on a personal level, they will respect your accomplishments. So that can be kind of important. And then we've got piety. It's not so important, for most things, but if you get excommunicated, you will need a certain amount of it, and you do need it to create titles. So for the Kingdom of Ireland, say, you require, I think it is 200 piety, plus a certain amount of gold. So you require piety for the Pope to essentially go, yes indeed, he has created the title, and it is his God-given right to have created the title. Fairly self-explanatory. You can increase that with various traits, but you can also increase it with event choices, and we'll get to that soon. Maybe not in this video. I'm going to try and keep this to about half an hour in length. And then underneath that you've got your score. So that's the prestige and piety of each successive character added to your score at the time of their death. That's basically just the arbitrary score meter, so you can put yourself against different dynasties in history. Kind of irrelevant. And then we've got traits. I might do a full in-depth video using the ruler designer to show how traits work in more detail, but essentially you've got a educational trait which can fall into any of these categories. Generally I go for stewardship, but that's only because stewardship provides a fertility bonus as well, meaning that you'll be able to pretty much ensure you get heirs. So Duke Murchad has Tough Soldier. Soldier is part of the warrior chain, obviously, and it increases your martial but decreases your learning. It does, however, make you less likely to die from wounds inflicted and gives you a bonus to your health. So he's fearsome on the battlefield, but he's only a mediocre commander, so it's not the top tier. We'll get more into those later on when we go looking for a wife in the Bridefinder. You've got Envious, which is one of the deadly sins. You've got the deadly sins and the virtues, and deadly sins are red, virtues are green. Neutrals are kind of just grey, but each one obviously has a separate picture. So Envious increases your intrigue but reduces your diplomatic skill. Some would say that that's actually not such a bad thing. Paranoid increases your intrigue, but you don't trust anybody, so you're less diplomatic. Shy means that you're just not really into meeting people. And Brave is kind of handy. It gives you an extra bonus to command, so that's the combat modifier, and it gives you a martial boost, which again helps. So this is the combat modifier. This is pretty much the last thing on this side that's important. The combat modifier is how good you are at fighting. So if you've got a really hard-bitten soldier who's got a massively big martial score and a special trait that can appear down here for commanding, say Unyielding, you can pretty much rest assured that that flank won't fall until everything else is destroyed around them, and that's very handy. So that's that side dealt with. Now we've got our titles. So these are the lands that we personally hold, and it shows our various titles and this line of succession for them. Underneath that is claims. Those are claims that we have on land that we haven't pressed yet. Some of them will be temporary because your Chancellor fabricates them. Some of them will be inherited from your parents because they didn't press them, but you can. And they come in two varieties. The first one is strong. Strong claims can be pressed by anyone at any time, and they can usually be inherited, but usually they'll be inherited as the second type, which is weak claims. Weak claims mean that you cannot push it except in special circumstances, and even more so if you're a woman. But we'll get to those in a different video where we talk about the war and the causes of war. For now, let's just go with what we've got. So the last bit on here is you. So also your dynasty is kind of important, so we will explain that when we go into the marriage. You've got your diplomacy for a specific character. Obviously with yourself there's not really all that many options. You've got your ambitions, so you can choose from a set of ambitions here. We've got amass wealth, which increases your stewardship. Become a paragon of virtue, which is basically just increase your learning and piety. Become famous, increases your diplomacy and prestige, and these all give you a title as well. So we've got, well, this one doesn't, but the Holy is your title for becoming a paragon of virtue, and the Great is for being for becoming exalted amongst men. You can choose to get married as your ambition, which gives you piety when you succeed. You can try to improve your stewardship. You can improve these traits if you've got one that's under 8. So that's why we only have stewardship, learning, and diplomacy. But for now, we're going to choose to get married. So what we're going to do there is we're going to go into the Bridefinder. So arrange marriage, Bridefinder. You can choose to filter by all these different things. So how much they like you, how high rank they are, so that'll be princesses and queens who come up first, etc. By their name, by their dynasty, if you've got a certain dynasty that you want to marry into, by their culture, if that's particularly important to you, by realm, which is kind of an iffy one. I don't really know why that's in there, but it's kind of important, I guess. By age, which can be important because you don't want to marry your ruler to a woman who can't give you children, and generally the cutoff for that is about 30. You don't really want to marry a young ruler to someone over 30. If you've already got heirs and you're just doing a remarriage, that's okay, that's fine. And then obviously you can filter by each of the traits, filter by religion, and filter by their ambition. What we're going to do is we're going to filter by stewardship because we want to reduce that weakness. So that gives us a set of candidates based on highest stewardship. So the person we've got here is Beatrice, who is a courtier in Gwyn's. And you'll notice that she's got a little flag next to her. That means you get an alliance from the marriage. Alliances only last as long as that marriage lasts. So once you or she is dead, you no longer have that alliance. But you can reforge them by marrying, say, a son or a daughter to that same family. Gives you an alliance. So, you know what, we'll go with her. So she's a fortune builder. That is the stewardship trait. And as you can see, it gives her +1 martial, -1 diplomacy, a lot of stewardship, a bit of learning, and fertility. So that's all nice. She's got a hair lip, which is kind of annoying because you can pass some of these things on to your children. It incurs a diplomatic penalty. She's diligent, which is nice, because that's an all-round good trait. It gives you a +1 to every stat. She's cynical, which takes away from her piety, because the church doesn't really like cynical people, surprise, surprise, but it increases her intrigue. She's chaste, which means she's probably not going to have as many children, but that's kind of offset by fortune builder. And she's ambitious, which is again another one of those traits that boosts all these. So she's Frankish, which isn't the worst thing in the world, because marrying her doesn't mean that our culture will be overridden. We're the father, so our culture is given. So we'll click marry, and you see that you get a prestige bonus from the marriage, or you can have a loss if you marry someone who is below your rank. And you can choose to have a matrilineal marriage where the mother's dynasty takes precedence, which you don't want to do when you're marrying your ruler, unless your ruler is a woman, because if your heir is someone not of your dynasty, you lose the game. But it can be useful. And she will accept the marriage because she's got a good opinion of us, prestige effects are good, political concerns are okay, and there's a little bit of base reluctance, but that's alright. So, marry. We'll just speed up time until she says yes. She says yes. We can choose to accept some gold for that, or we can take some prestige. We'll take the prestige. Prestige is very important, and you'll need to acquire a lot of it. So, no, people respect wealth. He's saying yes, indeed, you can marry her. Swell. Done. And there we go. We've fulfilled our ambition and gained an extra 10 piety. So we can choose another one. We can choose to try and have a son, have a daughter. No, we can't choose to have a son because we already have one. If you don't have a son already, you can choose to try and have one. But we'll go with have a daughter. We're not actually going to play that through. You'll get these messages about heirs, so Brian should marry. We'll find him a nice wife, but we won't continue on with it. We'll just find him a nice wife. So there you go. There's a case of religions. She's a Miaphysite. I'm assuming I mangled that miserably. So we'll find him someone with high stewardship as well. I tend to focus on stewardship, because stewardship is very, very important later on, because it rules how much domain size you can have. So we'll go with Constance. She's nice enough. There you go, marry her. Cool. Okay, so we're not actually going to follow through with that, but well, we will after a while, in the next video probably, when I explain other stuff. But for now, what we're going to look at is the council. And then we'll look at opinions between people. So the council is people that serve you. And you'll have noticed that we've got a number in brackets here. That's your state score. So you get your score, plus half of your wife's, and then half of the chancellors, I believe. No, you get all of the chancellors. All of the councillor. So your score plus half of your wife's plus the councillor. So she has diplomacy of 6. We get 3 of it. It rounds down as well. So if you've got someone who has a 5, you'll get a 2. So that means it's very important to choose a council that have high skills. And if people have higher skills than your current council member, they'll tell you, and you can either accept them or tell them hell no. So the Chancellor is your diplomatic guy, and he's got 3 abilities. He can improve diplomatic relations, which is generally good for improving relations with vassals you want to marry your children to, or kings that you want to sort of butter up so you can marry a child into their dynasty and gain an alliance, something like that. But they also have a chance of failing, and that chance gets higher the lower their diplomacy. They can fabricate claims, and that's generally how you'll start wars. And they've got claim. If you've got someone clever enough, they can form claims on duchies. But we'll talk about that more in the war video. And so descent is generally just to be a troublemaker, and so descent in a kingdom, say if you're going to attack it. Fairly self-explanatory. The Marshal is your lead warrior, so he can suppress revolts in your territories, which is fairly obvious. He can arrest troublemakers, and he can stop people from rebelling against you. Very, very useful. He can train troops, which speeds up how much time it takes for your levies to replenish, and actually gives you a bonus to how many levies you get from that particular county. Or he can research military technology, which is kind of handy, but we'll get into that in the technology video. Well, we're running up almost on half an hour. It's probably going to be about half an hour to 40 minutes for this video. You've got your steward, who's your accountant, essentially. You can get them to collect taxes, which is very important and boosts how much tax you get. So we'll put him in Thormont. You can only put them in counties you control, but you'll notice that that went up from a 4 to a 5.3. You can also get them to oversee construction, which is essentially just speeding up how quickly improvements to your domain are done. Or you can get them to research economic technologies, which again is self-explanatory. Your Spy Master, he is very, very useful. Actually, there's one exception to these. The only person who can be female is the Spy Master, and only 2 females are eligible. Your wife or your mother. But apparently that's going to change in the Old Gods as well, and you can appoint women with high enough martial skill to be your marshals. Apparently. But whether or not that shows up is a whole different video. So the Spy Master can scheme, and that's generally for uncovering plots and dissuading people from joining factions against you. Kind of important, because if you have plots against you, you could die. And it's even worse if your Spy Master doesn't like you, because they might join in the plot and kill you. That's not a fun thing to have happen. You can also build a spy network. That increases how easy it is for you to assassinate someone. So say there's somebody who you have a truce with and you don't want to wait for the truce to expire, you can put the Spy Master in their county, build a spy network, and you'll probably have a better chance of knifing them in the back. Or you can study technology, which is stealing technology. For that purpose, I'll explain it more in the technological vid, but it's generally a good idea to try and steal technology from the Muslim counties, because the game is historical in that Muslim counties in the south of Spain and north of Africa are more technologically advanced. I suggest you go to this one. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that. But it's got very high technological ratings, and it's a fairly good place to try and steal tech from. And then finally, you've got your court chaplain. So you can convert the populace. If you've got a heresy in there, or if you've conquered a Islamic county, you can try and convert the populace to your religion. Fairly self-explanatory. You can research cultural tech, which is basically just how advanced you are in the realm of culture, and occasionally you'll find great philosophers or heretics. Kind of cool. You can also improve religious relations, and that's very important because bishops pay their taxes to either you or the Pope, but if they like the Pope more, they pay them to him. Obviously, you want that money, because it's your money, damn it. No brainer. So there we go, that's how the council works. Now, I mentioned this thing a few times, its opinion. It's the last thing that we're going to be dealing with in this video, but it's very important. So we'll click on our heir, Brian McMurchad, and let's have a look. He's got an opinion here. That's his opinion of us. If he's from a different kingdom, you'll have these values be different. So you'll have his opinion of his liege, and then his liege's opinion of him. But the one that we're kind of focused on right now is this one. So this is the opinion of me. This will change dependent on our traits. So you'll notice that we get a -6 for personal diplomacy because we're not very good at it. It'll also depend on how long we've ruled, so we've got a -10 for a short reign. For the first 10 years you reign, you have a negative opinion malice with your vassals and everyone in your court. For 10 years you have nothing, and for 10 years plus you get +1 for every year you rule, up to 30 I think. You obviously get a plus bonus for being of the same dynasty, and you get pluses for enviable traits. So because we're brave, we get a +10, and because he's content, so he's not particularly ambitious, he's happy with his lot in life, we get a +50. Now we do get a minus from Gavelkind succession for some reason, even though he's our heir, because Gavelkind splits titles, but from vassals you'll get a positive for that, because they like the fact that you aren't keeping all the titles for yourself. So opinion is very important. If opinion is low, a vassal will probably decide, hey, you know what, I don't like him very much, and join a faction, and they can even go into open revolt against you. So you want to try and keep people butted up. That is the purpose of the council. The priests can do it for bishops, and the chancellor can do it for everybody else. Notably, if you've got a chancellor or a court chaplain who don't like you, you can also assign them to charm themselves. They'll do it. They'll charm themselves. Kind of weird, I know. But that's a basic rundown on how characters are at the beginning of the game. We'll go more into that sort of thing when we get to the more complex interactions such as war and that sort of thing. We'll look more at the alliances tab and the family tab and that sort of thing. We'll look more at these tabs later, but for now, the basic idea is that you understand these. You understand this part of the screen, hopefully. So if there's any questions that you have in particular, leave a comment, and I'll see you guys in the next episode of Let's Learn How to Play Crusader Kings 2. So this is GreyHunter for Game Level TV, signing out.